Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Invent Global Esports Conference that this year went digital. In the previous 2 years, we were able to host it in Irvine, California. But I think the good aspect of having it digitally this year is that we can have people from all over the place to just join us and to come talk about all things esports. Today, we're going to talk about the women that are leading the esports scene. And first off, I'm going to introduce myself. I am Lara Lunardi. I work for Invent Global and for SK Gaming. I am Invent Global's content manager and social media, so everything that gets posted on social or every article or interesting piece of content that we're doing goes through our team. We develop it together, and that's basically what we work on. And I would leave it to our guests to introduce themselves, starting off with Galen Malone.
Hi, I'm Galen. I am the Senior General Manager at Cloud9, which means I oversee all 13 of our professional teams and the support staff for those teams. I've been at Cloud9 for 3 years now, and prior to Cloud9, I worked on the esports teams of Riot Games and Hi-Res Studios. I graduated from the Savannah College of Art and Design in 2015 with a degree in game development, which I no longer use. But when I first graduated, I was a tech artist. And I volunteered in esports part-time to get experience in the field. And then eventually I got my first full-time job at Riot Games.
All right, and up next we have Joy Chow.
Hi, I'm the Director of Marketing for KSE Esports, which is the esports branch of the Kronk Esports and Entertainment family. They have the LA Rams in Los Angeles, and adding on to their sister teams, we've got the LA Gladiators in the Overwatch League and the LA Gorillas in the Call of Duty League. I studied integrated marketing communications and actually wanted to go into the NHL because I'm a fan of hockey. But I got the opportunity to take an internship in esports with one of our alumni. And after the internship, I realized that I was hooked, and I've been here ever since.
All right, sounds great. Sharon Winter.
Hey guys, I'm Sharon Winter. I'm the COO and co-founder of Esports One. We're the LCS and LEC fantasy platform and have worked essentially with Invent Global throughout this recent split. Before Esports One, I founded a different company in the media space, in the nightlife tech space. And before that, I went to Carnegie Mellon and I studied robotics and human-computer interaction and industrial design.
All right, I feel like our last guest needs no introduction, but please, Laura, could you give us a little bit of an insight on what you have done in the industry?
So my name is Laura. I work in the LEC. I'm the interviewer. I've been working with the European League of Legends broadcast for 3 years now. It's my third year. And alongside doing that, I'm also hosting several esports shows, whether it's on Twitch or on national TV in France. And I've been doing so for the past 4 years. Previously, I was studying journalism in a school in France. And I also have a degree in art history and English. And I mean, my first job in esports was kind of an internship also. I've done volunteer work before, and that led me to get my first real experience in esports, which was writing articles about the World Championship, about the esports scene in general. And yeah, one opportunity led to another. I ended working with the what I consider to be the best broadcast.
I have to agree. I am a little bit biased, but it's a great broadcast. All right, ladies. Today we're going to be talking about all things revolving being a woman in the leadership of several different aspects of esports. We have Laura with broadcasting, we have Sharon with entertainment, we have Joy working with teams, and as well as Galen. And I would like to ask you, why do you think that there is such a disparity when it comes to having women in leadership positions in the esports scene? This is to anyone that wishes to take.
I think for me, I think there's a lot of nepotism when it comes to the hiring process. People naturally want to hire people they have direct referrals for or people they've worked with before. And often those direct referrals are men because they're the ones that have held those leadership positions for so long in esports. It's kind of interesting, though, because I think we're now at a point where we're starting to see things pivot a little bit. You're starting to see a lot of the strong women who have had the internships or started low level grow. And particularly at Cloud9, I think 5 out of the 8 leadership positions we have are all women. So I think it's really interesting that we're kind of at this turning point. So yeah.
Yeah, like building off of that too, I think like similarly, our team is pretty small right now, but 2/3 of us are women, and that's very front of mind for us as we continue to grow. But I think something we've seen really recently that's been very prevalent as well, especially with all the stories that have been coming forward, is that while referrals are very, very important in the industry, networking may or may not be the most safe situations for people at times. And so I think that's another element that's been really, really just very relevant to us right now, especially with how recent everything has been. Something to consider.
I think when it comes to broadcast, for instance, which is a bit different, I think that managing positions in an esports company, I feel like for broadcast, as a woman, you get to experience the viewer experience at first. And let's say it's not a pretty image. You know the kind of people you can run into the community and stuff like that, and what people can say. And knowing that, I would understand some girls being a bit reluctant into getting into a sport for this situation, but I feel like, and we talked about this in interviews, the more public figures you see and the more girls you see visible on screen in production, because we had so many documentaries featuring women at Riot Games and in other esports position, these panels like this, these are the opportunities for girls to see that, yes, you can get into esports. There are more women that you would think. And I don't want to say an upgrade, but I see things getting better within the past few years, especially on broadcast, but also in managing positions. And this is something that I also see in esports structures as a whole. I tend to think that there's more women, and I feel like the more women will be visible in these fields and the more we'll have. But yeah, right now it tends to be like a very hostile environment, and yeah, you have to be strong to get into it. But I feel like it's things we'll also discuss later.
I think from the maybe the startup side or the tech side of esports is a very unique angle, because I think the tech community, and I come from the tech community, has kind of gone through this wave a little bit before esports. So their awareness and kind of their willingness to take, I mean, I hate to say it this way, but take a chance, right, on girls, on us, for male-dominated industries to look as an equal opportunity. It's kind of ridden its wave in that sense, and I feel like we've come out the other side stronger. So I think in the tech community, and as far as like my other tech founder friends and stuff like that, like we're very welcoming, very open, and actually quite excited to bring in that kind of angle and that demographic. That might be a great like entry point into the industry, specifically for startup gaming tech.
What do you think that are some of the hardships that the lack of representation has brought to the scene that is still visible now, even though we have seen plenty of progress?
I think we kind of touched on it, but it's like a lack of role models, right? A lack of mentors to look up to. If you can't really see yourself in someone else and like see the pathway they took, I think it's a little bit more difficult to kind of envision your next steps.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, to answer that, there's no real path to take. So when you come from the outside, you don't have the connections, you don't have the network, you see all this from outside. I mean, the amount of times I have girls or boys actually messaging me and saying, hey, how do you become an esports journalist? And I'm like, okay, there's an error here, because you don't become an esports journalist, you become a journalist and then you get interested into esports. And this lack of path, indeed, to reach esports career, I feel it's missing. But this is also something, a work on progress. And yeah, we'll see how things develop in the years to come. But this lack of path, to me, is also missing.
And to build on that too, which I think was so accurate, there's a point that you said, which is like communication, right? So being able to message and talk to and communicate with other women in power in esports and gaming, I think that's our responsibility to do as well in order to grow that community. So I won't speak on behalf of everyone here. Maybe they can comment, but I'm always open to taking. We're all really busy and we have a lot going on, but no, like it doesn't hurt to do 15 minutes ever, 10, 15 minutes of either replying to a message or anything like that. And I think more people in the industry, they feel for the people who are up and coming because we've all kind of had to come up in some sort of way. And so we're here more so than any other kind of generation, population, whatnot, to help empower the younger women who want to get into space.
Yeah, like going off of that, I will say that I will always take the time to respond to a message that's well crafted and reaching out and saying like, I have these specific questions about how I can get into the space. Do you have any advice? And I think that does matter though. It stands out from the messages going like, I would like to join your Fortnite team, So, I'm taking the time to also craft those messages. And honestly, I think there's probably a need as well to just in general for, I don't want to say career development, but something where I think a lot of people are lacking in understanding of even how to approach talking to people. So that might be on them to look into their own career center opportunities, or if they're not in college, to see like what there is offered on the internet. I'm not as familiar with that myself, but I do think there's something to be said for also helping people understand the professional skills needed to even capture the attention for that initial conversation.
You just mentioned receiving messages talking about, hey, can I join your Fortnite team? Have you received plenty of messages from girls, or do they come mostly from the male side?
It's kind of hard to tell their gender because normally I will say it's coming from like a gaming name, and I can tell the difference between like a 13-year-old and like a 20-year-old. That's the age is easier to ascertain, but
as we age, it's harder to tell, right? Like how much younger people. I totally get it.
But I will say I have received probably maybe I would say like a 70-30 or maybe a 65-35 split from like women students who are writing emails like explicitly being like, I'm making a documentary or I have these specific questions. And so it's really easy to tell because they clearly identify what they're looking for and they talk about that.
Yeah, I rarely ever get like females who want to be pro players messaging me, but I do probably have probably a 50-50 split in my DMs of like women who are reaching out for career advice. I've done a few of these panels and always offering my time, and it's become shorter and shorter because of that. But I think it's great to see.
Yeah, it's good to see, and it's also a good thing to do, and it's also the reason we see more and more women. I mean, I feel like when I started even 3 years ago on broadcast, I was used to receive many messages about work and how to get into esports, mostly coming from men. And yeah, I feel like it's about 50-50, and maybe sometimes a bit more women reaching out, but it's not about becoming players. It's about working in production, on air talent, managing team, even coaches, which is something that I really like because I rarely see women applying for coaching positions. So we see the upgrades and ameliorations like from time to time. But pro players yet. It's another topic that we have to cover, I feel.
I would love to dive into that. What about the competitive side of esports? Will an increase of women in the leadership of esports company increase the number of women competing, or is there something else that is missing right now?
I think it's like a very, it's a longer term, big picture kind of thing. Because like from the way, just for example, like the way the NHL has created generated interest in their sport, like hockey is the least popular of the big traditional sports in the United States, and actually almost every ice rink there is in Southern California is supported by either the LA Kings or the Ducks. And part of that is because in order to generate that interest and in order to generate the pro player feed, they have to start very young and start providing access to the community and allowing children to gain that interest, to start participating in their games, work their way up through the minor leagues, and then kind of go from there. And so I think it's a very, very wider than like all of us, but I think it's very important. And I'm actually very curious because I know some some teams like Cloud9 have started doing something similar. And so I think that's like definitely very, very, very front of mind for me on my radar for something I would want to build out in the future, but also very curious what everyone else has been doing.
Yeah, I think that you're pretty spot on with that. I know when I was at Riot, we talked about building League of Legends into like this multi-generational sport. And right now we're kind of at the point where a lot of us grew up playing games, but never super competitively, probably because our parents didn't. And it wasn't super supported, but we pivoted a little bit and we went into a more professional sense. I think it'll be really interesting for the next few generations. That might change a lot, right? You might have young girls who are growing up that are kind of supported in that sense to go into competitive. But right now, I wish I had more women in my DMs messaging me saying like, I'm at the top of the ladder of this game, like I really want a shot. But I just haven't seen it yet, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, actually, I was the sponsor for a project with Women in Games, the association. I don't know if you know it globally. And we found 10 girls that were paired with a coach, and the goal was that throughout the end of the year, they would find a team either tier 2 or tier 3, because right now it's very hard to access the LEC or even access the national leagues in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, from the first tier to the second one, we got even more girls applying because they saw the success of the first round. And I feel like it's the responsibility of projects like that or teams, because what ENTZ, for instance, in Brazil has been doing was a really great project, but it's also, it depends on what the teams want to do, because one thing that's baffled me the most over the past few years is the fact that talking to some coaches in the scene, they were telling me that if you have one girl and one boy that who are equally good, they would tend to prefer the guy player because it's easier to manage and easier to include in an environment. So Laura, when you say it is having more girl in managing position in teams, for instance, going to help that, I think yes, because getting player used to seeing more women in their environments maybe would help in them including them later on. But once again, it's a process that's going to take a few years. But yeah, it's for me the responsibility of the teams or the tournaments or associations like that to include more women in projects.
Right. Even with the case of INTZ, which was fantastic, they did sign 2 girls for tier 2. One was actually developing enough to play on CB LOL. Her name is Mayumi, and she's blowing up all over social media. She's a very skilled player.
She's amazing.
Yeah, I love her. But so far, I have not seen them actually take a chance, and I feel like it's so sad that people still think that it's too big of a risk to have a girl on the team. I really
agree.
hope this changes.
I think that, yeah, as you mentioned, we have more women in leadership positions. So once we get to that level, we'll definitely be able to take care of them. Because in the past, I think teams had less resources, so it was definitely more difficult. But we have so much funding now that I think it's possible. And something that I should have mentioned that Joy was hinting at, a lot of teams are spinning up like youth programs. And so Cloud9 has the training grounds that we're working on, which means we have a few youth teams that are playing underneath coaches and learning. And I think we have 4 right now, which means math, 20 players. And 7 of those players are women. So
that's great.
Hopefully in the next iteration of it, like we'll see success stories and that'll continue growing.
Sounds good. And what can you, as a woman leading the esports industry, do to ensure that there are more women inserted in all sorts of position, leadership or not?
Open the opportunities, like actively encourage. I feel like it's a very I mean, I don't want to blanket it, but it might be like a timid environment, right? Like you're unsure if you're welcome here, right? And so what is another application, and Joy was saying, which I 100% agree with, make it meaningful. Like if you're going to message us, we want like a meaningful response, give it some thought and all that. But if you're giving thought to 30 applications, right? What is that like it doesn't feel as exciting by the end of it. And so we got to just be vocal and tell people. I mean, my last company, we called it literally girl power, but in the sense of like it was all powered by girls, my previous company. And the men were outnumbered. There were 2 men and like 15 girls, and trust me guys, it worked. It doesn't break the system. There's nothing that we actually, I think we were hitting numbers even faster than we do here now at Esports One. And so I'm not saying it's better or worse, maybe it's different industry, but we're working to build the same exact thing here at Esports One. And there's a lot of stuff that we have kind of in the pipeline to create more girl power within the team. And power it a lot more by women. And I think that it starts up with being encouraging in a lot of these panels like this, where it's just vocal, and the right girls, the girls who are really interested in this, are chiming into this. They're the ones listening to this recording and to the other ones that we're all doing. So yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, from the org perspective, I think something that we've done in the past a lot is we just hire internally or hire within our network. And something I've been trying to encourage a lot is, doing open applications. And yeah, you're going to have to read through 4,000 applications for a few jobs, but you end up getting the best candidate you can get, and it's opening up that opportunity to a lot of women. We did that for an internship position recently, and we could have easily filled all 6 positions internally with references, but we waded through all the applications, and 5 out of the 6 interns we hired ended up being underrepresented groups in esports, which I thought was amazing because it wasn't something we were hiring for. It wasn't something we were looking at, but they ended up being the best fit.
Yeah, as I build out our team too, like, excuse me, like I've done a lot of hiring in the past, and I will be doing more in the future as well. And because I don't come from that endemic, like, oh, I've been in esports for so long, I know all these people that I'm going to fill. Like I actually actively try to avoid going for internal referrals. I'd rather open that up and see who, like the best candidate who's out there. And, my process is very extensive, but just to make sure that you have the right person for the job. And at the same time, when you open it up to people who haven't been in esports for so long, you bring that wealth and breadth of background. Like what Laura said earlier, you're not looking for like an esports journalist. You're looking for a journalist who has that training, and then, they apply that to this new industry. And so they bring a lot of experience from other backgrounds and other industries that they've been in. And so that's something I really look for as well.
Talking from this side of the talents, I never had to deal with open applications or not, because I kind of sent every request I had spontaneously, even though there were no applications or not to take. But I feel like you won't always be like that, and people can be shy and not there taking this shot. So I feel like having sessions like this, roundtable, places to meet girls, to talk with them. Also, to echo to everything you said, receiving a serious message, well phrased, about someone who knows what she wants, will get a better and more informative reply. But just showing to women that they belong in esports, and as someone on camera, I feel like we just need to have more role model, more visible one, and role model who are ready to help also. And with time, my goal is to make girls understand that they shouldn't be afraid to take a stance and to try to get into esports, because the worst thing that can happen is a no. People are not going to jump at you. People are not going to scream at you. And yeah, you take another chance later and afterwards. But that's just proving that you belong and that you have a spot. So I'm thankful we can have conversations like this right now.
And are we going to hear some no's before we get a yes, right?
Yeah. a lot. Having a
sorry.
first chance is not easy, though, I'd say.
Sharon, do you have anything to add on the subject?
No, I was going to sneeze.
Bless you.
That's also something to add. Touching on the subject of building these success stories, what kind of traits would you say that the women that are succeeding in esports would have? Personally, I would say that we're all very stubborn. That's just my opinion, though.
I put it as like tenacity and resilience.
Exactly. That's a better way to phrase it.
Yeah, we're tenacious, right? But I think like also just because the industry is so new, and a lot of these organizations, some of them have been around for longer, but I think almost all of them would still qualify for being a startup, just by technical terms. I mean, Sharon, you come from that world, so I don't know if you agree with that statement, but
I think we're a startup industry of sorts, right?
Yeah.
Well, even the biggest, well, not the biggest orgs, but everything right under the biggest orgs all runs like a startup. I feel like
absolutely. And with that, I think there's a lot of roadblocks, and there's a lot of bumps in the road, and just a lot of obstacles that will be faced just because of the situation of how young the industry and probably the organization you're at is. And so I think it's really important to have the tenacity and the resilience to not only deal with that, but to bounce back and to keep on coming back. And then the other thing I think is really important, and I think we've touched on it a little bit, is because there's a lot of nepotism in this industry, my biggest pet peeve is complacency. I think there's a lot of people who honestly, they hustle really hard to get here, but then when they feel like they've made it, then they become complacent. And that's my biggest pet peeve that I see in esports, because there is a lot of complacency, and there are still a lot of people out there hustling. And so I think having that openness to people from different backgrounds helps keep with that turnover as well, like making sure that we're not all becoming complacent, like, oh, I've made it, I don't have to try as hard, or I don't have to, I'm coasting now, like we're still building a very new industry.
I agree with that. I mean, the industry is moving too fast for people to just rest like that. And there's always going to be more people more motivated than you with maybe more qualifications, because the fact that this industry is still under construction in a way is the fact that, I mean, I don't want to say you can get away with things without having a degree, but right now it's still not necessary to have like a big degree in something to have a career in esports, which may not be the case in a few years. So yeah, just tenacity, as we said. You have to be curious. You have to meet people. You have to have a network. That's very important. Not especially for the nepotism reasons we mentioned, but just because I mean, the person you're gonna meet at this event maybe the person who's going to give you some work tomorrow, just because you will have the qualifications needed, and these people, hey, they met you 1 week ago, so they're going to give you a call. So yeah, just stay open-minded, curious, and have a strong network, I would say. But to me, passion and being curious is the two main assets.
Yeah, I think my skills that I look for mostly are people who are super organized and are well-spoken and passionate about it. A lot of things in esports, like as we mentioned, you don't really have to have a degree for, so you kind of learn along the way, and you end up wearing a lot of hats doing your job. But yeah, you have to be organized, and you have to be willing to stand up for yourself and be well-spoken about it.
And from our end, I've said this multiple times in the past, and I swear by this, but this is maybe more from like the tech and startup side. Specifically for women who are trying to get in the industry or any industry, I always say, sometimes we come at a disadvantage, right? Like people aren't as attentive to what we're saying. This is sometimes, not always. But no matter what, I think if you come ready with the data or the knowledge or research in advance and come prepared, no one can question you, right? You can be at a presentation, no one can humiliate you, no one can say that's wrong, because you can say, where are your stats, right? And if you know the materials better than anyone else in the room, and it doesn't take much. People are complacent, people are lazy, people are, too confident to do, they think they know it all. But if you tell them, 60% of our users are on mobile, and 90% of them are on Android, whatever it is, like those numbers you can't contest with. And no matter who's in the room, it doesn't matter if they're 20 years senior of you, or a male, a female, the owner, the CEO of the company, it doesn't matter. You'll always win that battle, and you won't sound like you're doing it. You'll just sound informed and prepared. And I think that no matter what, for us to come out on top, and that's something that I definitely look for. If I see someone kind of like saying, using facts to back up what their hypothesis is, or their ideas, or what they want to build with us, or whatever it is, I always listen. I always ask why. And I think that is a literally bulletproof way to move up the ladder in any industry. And maybe on the gaming side as well, you guys can speak to how that works, but on the tech startup side, there's a lot to do with users, a lot to do with viewership, a lot to do with what products to build, all that, and it's all data driven. And having that mindset is important, just like having an organization.
Sounds good. What kind of opportunities came into play for you women to succeed? And this can be something personal, or you can also share something that you think that may be useful for other people that are willing to build off of career.
Data.
Data's not an opportunity, is it? I guess it is.
I think for me, I was applying for jobs in the game industry, like development jobs. And anyone knows breaking into industry, you get a lot of no's. I think I probably got rejected from like 40 jobs. And to get into esports, the thing I kind of did was I found the person at Riot that had the job that I wanted. And I messaged them being like, hey, this is my experience. Like, where can I improve to like see success? And they actually took the time to like chat with me and talk through my resume and where I need to improve. And then probably about 6 months later, I got a lot of the experience because there were some big things happening where I was living. And I hit him up again, and he just like directly inserted me into the interview pipeline. So that was something that I learned a lot from, was just like reaching out, even if they're not going to reply, even if they're going to say no.
Yeah, for my end, I think I have a very unusual path, and I think a very privileged, where I'm very blessed, fortunate to have had the situation I did, where I actually woke up to the offer and I'd never heard about esports, and that was because I actually wanted to go into hockey so bad that I had put together I had done my own focus groups, my own research, and I put together a presentation. It was actually for the LA Kings. I hate the Kings, but they were the closest team to me. And I really wanted to go into NHL that bad. And so I put together this entire project, like a pitch, just being like, I've already done interviews for specific groups that maybe are not fans of you, and here's my insight on how you can reach them better, and on different things you could be doing. And I couldn't get a hold of anyone to give it to see if they even had an internship opportunity. But my professors helped me look at it and gave me feedback. And so when our alumni came around asking and saying that he needed interns, they actually just suggested me by name. And so I woke up to that email, and I was one of 2 interns that helped out that semester. But like the other person honestly just disappeared. I don't know what happened to the dude, but I just worked really hard, and they had no marketing at the time. And so that's why I was able to start something and build it out. And that's why I did start from an intern and end up where I am now. But I think it was
what's
very
your
lucky.
first impression? What's your first impression of esports then? If you came from somewhere else and you didn't expect to be here, and you're a big fan of sports, where do you think we're heading?
Well, I think esports definitely, I think a lot of people are talking about how they can reach gamers as to be fans of esports, to watch the games, and like as casual fans. I come from a group of people who don't game at all. I recently picked up Animal Crossing and put hundreds of hours into it. But other than that,
As you
none of my friends games, and I didn't. And so when I worked in LCS, actually, also in the Overwatch League, I brought almost every friend, and everyone came back. And none of them had any game background, and they all found it fascinating. And I will say that LCS League is a lot easier to follow than Overwatch, but the fact that you can take people who have no interest in games, bring them to a live event, have them hooked and want to come back, for me, that speaks a lot to the accessibility of esports to the rest of the world, because, not everyone, like, I think a lot of people now say that there's a very large percentage of people in the world who say that they are gamers, and that's really great. But I think there's also people who don't even think of themselves as gamers who are interested in esports. And so I see a lot of opportunity there as well.
All right, and back to Laura. I'm sorry I derailed with a question, but I thought it was really interesting that someone here had a background that was so different. What kind of opportunities do you think that played into setting you to your path? Maybe not just focused on education, but professional as well.
No, but we've been talking about open jobs and open applications and stuff like that. And I mean, when I first started, I got rejected many times because I didn't have the qualifications, because I didn't have the experience. So one thing that set me up on the right path, I'd say, is all the volunteer work you can get in esports, because this is where you get the first experience, and this is what can bring you to a first internship and then a first job later. And I mean, in every volunteer work, you'll get to know people with more experience than you. And to me, I mean, I've never been afraid to ask questions, to just know more about stuff. Okay, for production, how do you get to work this and this and this? And this is all the experience you can grab. So to me, doing the more you can, even if it's for free for the first time, even if it's to gain some experience, is the perfect way to get on the right path. And I mean, again, there's no education on how to work in esports, so you have to make your own experience, and it's by, at first, at least, getting this one job experiences, maybe voluntarily. Yeah, that's the best part, I'd say, and that's what, yeah, that's what I learned the most from.
And Sharon, other than data, do you have anything to add?
That's what I meant before I blurted data. Was similarly to Laura. I looked around several places. I don't think like applied, but I inquired in several places. I was just leaving my previous company, really intrigued by esports, really intrigued by the tech that's going behind it, especially computer vision and people utilizing kind of like high tech with it from my robotics background. And for me, the entry point was showcasing my expertise. So I guess if you're kind of well seasoned-ish, but maybe in a different industry, coming in and showing what expertise you have that could contribute into this industry, or what can translate. For me, it was, access to a ton of brands at my previous company. I had access to 3,000 of the top brands in the world that we worked with. And so having that, and then showing metrics and showing anything that I could that were stats, and that just brings some sort of, and also being on the flip side now, right, being on the recruiting side or like the managing side, it gives me some sort of calm knowing that someone can make decisions factually. That's how I work, and that's what I meant, I guess, by data, and that's what helped me in every sort of opportunity I ever entered. Is really coming in with ideas that aren't just fantasy, but they're dreams with some math equations underneath it. Maybe that's my personality, but data, I guess.
Back to the first thing that we were talking about, and how there is more representation of women, but it's still predominantly male. Our audience here today is predominantly male. What advice do you have for them to assist women to get inserted into esports? I know I kind of put you ladies on the spot. Perhaps
I think probably.
Oh, go ahead, Joy. No, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, something about just like making sure you challenge your own like preconceptions. I think there's a tendency for a lot of people, is particularly men, just from experience, that they tend to gatekeep and challenge people like, oh, why are you here? Are you a real fan? Do you really have the knowledge? And like Sharon said, like being prepared, not just being prepared with the facts and data, but you're forced to come more prepared because they will challenge you, and you know that. So I think part of that, and while I think like challenging people in a way helps push them to be better, but at the same time, like if you're not doing it to other men, then you really need to consider, why are you doing that?
I mean, with my experience, I've been really blessed and lucky because before coming to the LEC, I was working with the French broadcast for all League of Legends competition. Their name is O-Gaming, and obviously it's predominantly male casters. I was actually the first girl to really join their broadcast, and I mean, they were open-minded. They didn't challenge me more than any other caster. That actually made me feel included from the start, and I felt welcome, and I felt like I belong. And to me, this is the attitude to have, because I came into this first job in a broadcast as someone who belonged, and never my spot was second guessed. Never I had to prove that I belonged every day, because these male colleagues made me feel like I was not less. I wasn't worth less than any other caster. So to me, yeah, just making people feel welcome and not challenge them more than you would challenge your male colleague. That's important. And yeah, the way they acted with me, to me, is the way most of companies should act towards women in general.
Yeah, to kind of play off of that, I think something that is really great to see is when you're networking with a colleague, not to introduce them as like, oh, this is so and so who I work with, but to actually mention their full title, like you give them the respect of this person's in a leadership position and like her opinions and her thoughts are super valid and like you should listen to them. I think that's something that's really powerful that men as allies can do.
Sharon, would you like to share anything?
I agree with it all. I think
we're all in agreement. Yes.
I think it's open-mindedness, right? It comes back to, it's hard to say, but like, do you have sisters? Do you have a mom? Do you have daughters? Like, what kind of opportunities are available for them? And I can't teach over, I can't kind of preach over a 1 minute speaking position to say how to do it all, but all those points are very valid. And I think that the open-mindedness is key. And the excitement for what women can, there's some things women do better. There really are. And just recognizing those and placing them positionally or strategically in those positions to help you guys grow.
Yeah, the sports industry still has a lot to grow. And talking about growth, what are some of the projects that you guys are working towards, if you can share, that you think will be important to the esports scene in the future?
Oh, I think that's tough. A lot of us aren't able to talk about the projects you're working on.
Yeah.
But I will talk about, I mentioned it previously, but the internship program that I spun up, where we opened up 6 positions. I think doing things like that, if you're able to, are super important in order to get new faces and new experience into the industry. It's something that it obviously takes a lot of budget, but because of COVID and so many interns having their offers reneged, I thought it was super important to kind of open up the space a little bit. And it's been something that's been super beneficial for our org too. We've been able to bring in so much young talent.
Your org has just partnered with Amanda as someone who is going to bring a lot of diversity to your organization. How did that work?
I didn't work on that campaign a lot. Our director of marketing, Emily, would be able to speak to that a lot better than I would. But she helped us make sure that our Pride campaigns that we were doing for the Pride Month were super genuine and, we're touching all the right bases, because I think that if you're not working with someone in the space to make sure that they are genuine, it just, it shows a lot when you're putting a rainbow on your logo and that's it.
That's fair. Anyone else willing to share about their upcoming projects?
It's a project, but will it take 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years? I don't know. I will be launching my own company soon because of COVID and everything was delayed, but that's still a plan. And with that, my goal is to not take a step back, but I want to say take a step forward into production, building my own shows with my own talents. Not my own talents, but talents that I would be scouting, and giving them the opportunity to do the content they want, giving them what's necessary, the tools to engage, how to present, and just building this show and showcasing new talents that are willing to take part into the scene. So hopefully within a year. If I can't make it within a year, that will be 2 years. But that's one of my main projects for the next years.
That's fantastic. Joy?
For us, I think, I'm not sure if people in LA are a little more familiar with this, but Inglewood is currently building a really large stadium complex. It's not just a stadium, there's going to be a lot more. And so in the long term, there is going to be a space for esports there as well. And I think it'll be a really, really unique, unique opportunity for people to have like a very direct in-person touch point with the community.
That sounds fantastic. We are up and it is time for us to say goodbye. And I would like to say that I appreciate every single one of you that came here to talk and to share your experiences with our audience today. And I am excited to hopefully meet you ladies in the future when COVID is no longer a threat and we can all hug and shake hands and all that.
I'd love to. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you.
Thank you.